Okay, so I'm going to start out just introducing us. My name is Sarah Holger, and today is February 24th, 2025. We are doing a telephone interview. I'm in Wabasha, Minnesota today, and I am interviewing somebody who is up in the Twin Cities. So could you tell me your name and where you're located today?
John Woodward. I'm located in St. Louis Park, Minnesota.
Wonderful. Okay, so we've talked, well, we've emailed. We've never really talked on the phone, we did one time. I think we did.
Did we? Oh,
like
okay.
2 years ago, maybe, or something. It was when I was.
My goodness,
yeah, it's been a
really?
while.
Okay.
Because if I remember right, you have some connection to Mound where I grew up, don't you?
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's right. Yes, I grew up in Mound.
Oh.
I moved there in 7th grade and lived there and graduated from high school in Mound, and then went back and taught in Mound. Taught at Grandview Junior High for 1 year.
That's so crazy. Yeah. So I graduated from Mound West Tonka High School, and I was, whatever. So yeah, small world.
Really?
Right?
But can I ask you what year?
It was in 1994.
Okay.
So.
And I graduated in 73.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So I guess you could have been my daughter.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well I have these questions, and we don't have to stick to the questions, but they just help me stay focused because I'm really good at going off on tangents.
Sure. And
So
can I know you're taping this, but can I ask you, is this, I can't remember, was this for a specific project? You said you had a deadline.
yeah, so this is it's a project called Abolitionists of Southeast Minnesota Oral History Project. I worked through a nonprofit organization to get a grant from the Minnesota Historical Society to interview 10 to 12 descendants of abolitionists who had come here prior to the Civil War. And so it's been super difficult to track people down. You know?
Okay.
So I appreciate your time. And I know you don't know a whole lot, you know a little bit, and that's fine. We're just looking to find out what do these descendants know about their ancestors, because it can kind of help fill in some of the missing pieces. So,
William Stork, who's maybe I'll let you ask the question.
Ask the question?
First,
okay, so we know that you lived in Mound. Where were you born?
I was born in Minneapolis.
Okay, in Minneapolis,
Yeah.
and then
I lived in the western suburbs, really all of my life.
Okay.
So I lived in Golden Valley, and then moved to Mound, and then I went off to college.
Okay, where'd you go to college?
Concordia and Moorhead.
Okay, and then you became a teacher?
Yes, I was a music teacher.
Fun. That must have been fun.
Can we? Yes. Yeah, 10% fun, 90% classroom management. But yeah.
Oh my goodness! And like Grandview, I mean, that's like early. Like kids are just learning how to play their instruments in middle school.
Yeah. I was more of a vocal guy, so I directed choirs. And then
Sure.
The bulk of my career, I've taught elementary music at the Blake School.
Oh, fun! The Blake School. That's a neat school. They do some cool stuff.
Yeah, it's a wonderful school. Yeah.
Okay, well, wonderful. So let's get into maybe the focus is about abolitionists. So can you tell me a little bit about William Stork, your ancestor? What do you know about? Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
sorry, I thought my phone was cutting out. If you know any of these things. Oh.
Let me know if there's a problem, because I'm working through my hearing aids. So if we cut out, if it's a problem, I can go to phone up to my ear. But right now, it's easier for me if I don't have the phone up to my ear.
No, this is fine, and I think there's messages coming through on my phone, which is weird. Nobody ever tries to get a hold of me.
Okay.
So it's making little beeping sounds. But anyways, so tell me about William Stork.
I have this journal of his that's just amazing, and I think, if I recall correctly, he wrote this as an elderly man about his whole life, and it's a huge, amazing journal and he was quite a writer and quite a unique character. So So he was born in 1808 in Burlington, New York. And he grew up in Burlington, and his father at one point made a lot of bad business deals. His father's name was John Stork, and the dealings had to do with building a dam, a sawmill, a cotton factory, and they all failed. So for many years there was this extreme suffering because of this, because of the financial setback. But they recovered from it, and William went on to move from, I don't think it's far from Burlington, but it moved to Cooperstown to work at a trade, and he was an apprentice hat maker.
Huh.
So he did hat making for a handful of years then. And there was a time where a friend of William's father was a congressman, and he had connections to West Point, and he offered to help him get into West Point, but William didn't want to have any of that because he was forming some ideas about what he cared about, what he valued, and he thought it was too much of he thought he was too much of a Democrat to go to that aristocratic institution.
Huh.
So that's kind of in quotes because I read that from his journal.
Okay.
But anyway, he had an incredible experience, but I'll skip that part of it. That gradually he became interested in. He challenged the church in terms of having a faith, and gradually he defined himself as a universalist.
Okay.
And he moved to from Cooperstown after he had done his training as an apprentice. He decided to move to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and he moved there in, I believe it was 1835, something like that, 1835, give or take a year. And his intention was to continue on with that trade, but he never did. He ended up just working the land and being a farmer there for about 15 years. And during that time, actually back in Cooperstown, I believe he met and married Angeline. Angeline was her name. And so they had one child while they were in Cooperstown. And so the three of them moved to Lake Geneva, and they got there. They moved there, and they were some of the first to kind of plot their land and claim their land. I just happened to visit there last summer.
Oh, neat!
And it was fascinating because I went to the museum and I went to the county historical society and found some records. But he was there for 15 years, and while he was there, he was. Let's see, I'm going to just read some little of this to you. It's interesting. He evolved from, in terms of his anti-slavery beliefs. At one point, while he was there, he talked about someone that he was meeting in the street, and he said, "That dirty black fellow is beneath my acquaintance, of course."
Huh.
So that was, but his life, he ended up being quite an anti-slavery person involved with an organization. Let's see if I can move on here. He was disenchanted with the Democratic Party, and he became involved in an equal rights party by the name of Local Foes, LOCOFOCOS. It was a faction of the Democratic Party in America that existed from 1835 until the mid-1840s.
Huh.
So he was involved in that. And then many settlers had come to Lake Geneva. And there was a debating club was organized to while away the long winter evenings. I'm reading this now. In order to have some recreation that might be useful to the community. And the two best debaters were two noted abolitionists. Uh-huh. This is in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin now. Not, I know you're looking specifically at the county in Minnesota, but this sort of formed his involvement. So the two noted abolitionists, the names were Osborne Hand and Harrison Auger, A-U-G-E-R. And they were constantly bringing up the subject of slavery to William's infinite disgust is what it says. It says, let the question under discussion be ever so remote from that subject. Still, they would ring it in somehow and necessitate some reply from William. Though the subject of slavery in the United States is a subject that William did not wish to look at. This course of action quite vexed and irritated him, and he thought it best to have that subject thoroughly debated once and for all, and that should be the end of it. Not having had this constant harping on the subject, William accordingly challenged them to debate that subject in this debating club, and to get all the advantage of them he could. And he asked, and the question was read: Is intemperance a worse evil than slavery? The discussion excited very great interest, and people came to listen to that. One lawyer came from Elkhorn, Wisconsin, the county seat, to help on William's side the affirmative question. Is this good? Is this worthwhile?
Yeah, no, this is great. I'm taking a bunch of notes, so just keep on talking.
Okay. I'm kind of turned to reading here because it's more accurate than me trying to guess what he was saying.
Yeah, that's fine.
William commenced the discussion much out of spite and carried to great lengths. It was the subject for 2 evenings. The prejudices of the community were against anything tainted with abolitionism at that time. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It was therefore easy to set the current of popular feeling against their cause. It was said that even tract and Bible societies and most charitable institutions in the land were either pro-slavery or entirely dumb on that subject. If anyone should sell a man of color or woman either and put the price into the treasury of the Lord, in quotes, treasury of the Lord, he had a commendable act. Both the great political parties were opposed to abolitionists. Mobs would destroy their presses and maltreat, and even sometimes kill its advocates. And no prayer was heard in any fashionable church for the despised slave. A Methodist presiding elder who had the charge of the circuit in which William lived in Wisconsin had 2 black slaves in his family. William took the ground in the debate that slavery was not immoral, nor in fact any evil at all, that it was on the hall of benefit to the black race and was sanctioned by the Holy Scriptures.
Jeepers.
William had always found it much easier to go with them than against. The prejudices of the communities, his side triumphed in the debate, and at first he felt quite elated thereby. But on the next day, when all excitement was gone, and he was thinking seriously upon the subject, his mind went back to Cooperstown, and he thought of the many colored men with whom he was well acquainted with there. There was Hayden Waters, who called regularly for the Freeman's Journal, and Redditt, who gave an address to the colored people on the anniversary of the deliverance from slavery in New York State, which address was said, even white folks who heard it, to be replaced with plain common sense, and was altogether very credible. He used to come into William's hat store about once in each year with his boys and fit them all with hats. So it's interesting. I skipped over words because it's hard to read. His woolly-headed boys, and fit them all with hats. William thought of him and many others, the names of whom, even at this distance of time, are perfectly familiar to him, together with the peculiarities of each person. But they need not be mentioned, lest the volume be swelled to largest. Oh, I can't remember read what I meant there. Let's see now. While thinking of them, and that this class of persons would well represent the slaves of the South, the idea came to William that if I ought to be free, they ought to be free. If it were right to enslave them, it were right for anyone having the power to enslave them. William then saw plainly, so this was his transition, saw plainly that he had thus far opposed a holy cause, and a sense of condemnation stole over him. He sat down and cried with remorse.
Aww.
He then and there vowed to atone for his former opposition and neglect by his future devotion to the cause of abolitionism. And well has he redeemed that pledge.
Wow.
So I'll stop there because I just want to tell you that what I'm reading here is something that I was reading out of his journal, but it was is written first person.
Right.
So I changed the I's to he.
Okay, I was wondering. I didn't know if that was like a newspaper story or what. Okay.
No. Yeah. I did that a long time ago. I forgot I did this. So this morning I discovered that I had this.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, you might have seen on my Ancestry.com there was a one-page article in the Harmony paper. And I wonder if that's where you came up with the names Dayton and Augur.
Yeah, so I first saw them, I think in the history of Fillmore County, there's a little, those old county books, and you go by and it's at each person, there's like a little profile on them. I think that's where I maybe first saw it, and then I did some searching, and then there was that article that just kind of quotes from the history book, but it's the exact same information. So it's not a whole lot there. It's like one little paragraph.
Right, okay.
Yeah, but can you remind us what that talked about, that article?
Yeah, I'll just pull it up here so I can be accurate with it. Let's see. I find it interesting, that journal, the way he wrote, because he's reflecting back, and he was really putting himself into that headspace of really fighting for the rights of slavery.
Right. Yeah.
And then he made some sort of remarkable transition. And one thing, a little side note, is that he and his wife ended up being more and more involved in, I can't remember the name of it, but they had mediums, and they were involved in sixth sense and away from the physical, and communicating with people from beyond. So he was involved in this. And the interesting thing to me is that he was, for a while, for years in Cooperstown, he was a hat maker. And you hear about what's that expression?
Mad Hatter.
The Mad Hatter.
Yeah. Because
the way they treated it with mercury.
Right. Yeah, and he
I thought that was just...
Right, and he had like visions too, where he would have these really powerful dreams that were like visions. That's
right. I sent you a copy of that. One of the most remarkable visions he had. I don't know if you read that, but he wrote that in this journal, and it's like a full-page vision that's just amazing. It doesn't really have anything to do with anti-slavery movement, but it's remarkable in what he conjured up in his head.
Well, I was trying to interpret it because, like, he's describing it as this church that he's coming to in his dream, and the church has like an addition on it that he's like, the addition doesn't need to be there. Like the core of the church is this beautiful old stone building, and they're adding this like lean-to on the side, and then the church, like, what is it? One of the guys constructing it kicks a pillar out, but he's using it as a analogy for, and what I thought was he was making it sound like the Civil War and the war that was to come. I don't know, and I felt like there maybe was kind of a slavery spin to it, because that was the great question of the day that led to the war. I don't know.
It could be that was a metaphor, and that vision came to him. I also read into there, his how he evolved in the church, that he didn't like it was a class thing.
Oh, sure.
That there were people that it seemed to me that he was speaking of a class thing, and the church, that building that had pillars and strong, and then on the outside a little lean-to of a thing. It just seemed to be some sort of class thing going on there too.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really quite know, but he kind of ended it with like, it was a foreshadow of the big events that were to come and face the nation, and I was like, something along those lines.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yes, let's say that.
Or maybe it's a little bit of everything. I don't know.
Well, whatever you're doing with this, maybe that's a powerful thing to conclude.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So thank you for sending that. So did you find that article?
Yep, I did. So it says it was written by William Stork in 1882 while he was in Harmony, and this is from the News, the Record Harmony Centennial Edition from 1996. So they're publishing this piece, and William lived until 1901.
Okay.
So it says, well, I don't know how much of it you'd like me to read, but I'll read the last part that has to do with anti-slavery. The Indians were quite numerous when we first arrived in Minnesota, and they conceived a great admiration for our bright-colored bed quilts and for our improved rifle, which, in the hands of our boys, William and Edwin, did great execution among the deer, and we had plenty of venison and deerskins. At first, democracy was rampant in the town, county, and territory. And in my efforts to free the town from this rule, I was only assisted by After Hogue and Daniel Dayton, and many others by organizing the anti-slavery sentiment in town in opposition to it. And after a hard struggle, we succeeded. And I can say without boasting that I became quite conspicuous as a leader in the struggle.
Yeah, right? Like, I wish I could ask him some questions about that.
Yeah, right.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. So, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, his character in this journal comes through. He's a little bit hard to like at times in the journal. That he seems to have a pretty big ego. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. I see that too. But he also seems like he would have been very charismatic. Like if you were in a room with him when he's speaking.
Yes, right. I think so.
Oh my goodness. Well, so you mentioned, and so when you mentioned Harmony, that's down in Fillmore County. So that's down like on the Iowa border, way down in southeast Minnesota. And so they came to that Harmony area. That quote there just mentioned this After Hogue, which I did a little digging around on him, and he's a Quaker. He comes from a Quaker family, and he has family members that were actually involved in the Underground Railroad, which is interesting. And then the Daniel Dayton, I couldn't find a whole lot on like if he was anti-slavery or not, but them saying that he was involved with their little group there in Harmony, which was anti-slavery. Dayton ran, what was it called, the Ravine House Hotel or something like that. It was a stagecoach stop right there by Harmony.
In Harmony, okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of curious like that, if we're thinking like. And your great-great-great-grandpa doesn't talk about the Underground Railroad at all. He's just talking about anti-slavery societies. But another piece of this is, like, there's all these local legends about the Underground Railroad in our region. So, like, if we're looking at Fillmore County, could that hotel stagecoach stop there with the Daytons and all these guys right there? Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to find out, I'm curious now, I have to look at the last part of his journal because I'm about 2/3 of the way through just reviewing it. And one of the things that I'm thinking is that there were Dayton relatives of the Storks.
Right.
So I'm wondering if Daniel Dayton had married possibly one of his daughters, maybe.
Well, what I think I found was that one of William's daughters married this Aaron Hayes Hurd Dayton. So it's one of Daniel Dayton's sons.
Okay.
Well, actually, it looked like there's, like, William Stork had 2 daughters and 2 sons, was it? Something like that? And the first daughter was married to this Dayton guy and then actually must have died in childbirth because she died when she was like 21. And then that same Dayton marries the other daughter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, they were obviously close if they intermarried.
Yes, that rings a bell to me. I feel like I've read that.
Yeah. So.
I'm looking here to just see, because you asked me about William's kids, and now I'm looking at what I put down in his family tree. It says, let's see, it says birth of son William Ellis Stork, who was my great grandfather.
Okay.
And he was born in 1841 in Lake Geneva.
Okay.
And he also had another son, Charles Franklin Stork. And that's a whole other interesting person too. And then birth of son, and then I don't have any other kids listed here, but I know he had other kids.
Yeah, there's an Adeline and
right. Adeline was first.
Yeah, and then an Anne and then a Rosalie. And Anne's the one that died young. She was 21, and then that Dayton guy then marries the Rosalie next, and that Rosalie lived until 1945. So she was like 90?
Really? Okay.
And she died in Preston, so she stuck around the Preston area her whole life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Well, I've been down to Harmony, and the first time I went down there, my goal was to try to find the cemetery where these people were buried.
Sure.
And they were just, I did it blindly. And I went down there, and there were 3 cemeteries, one north, one south, and one in town. And I went to the one in town, not there, the one south, right near those caves. The famous caves just
oh, yeah. Is that Niagara?
Niagara Caves, I think. And then I finally went to the one north, which is about 5 miles out of town, which went right by what I had found the land where the Stork home was,
Aww.
which was out in the country. And so I went down to this little graveyard. It wasn't too little, but it was little enough. And I spent 20 minutes wandering around, and finally I came upon all the Stork graves.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I know there's still some storks around Fillmore County. I would assume they're related, but maybe not, because there's a Ed Stork that used to work for the DNR fisheries out of Lanesboro. He retired like 20 years ago, but I was trying to find somebody else too. Like I was trying to see, is there anybody else that still lives down there? And I think I haven't found an obituary on him, so I think he's still alive.
Interesting.
Right? Oh.
I know I haven't heard about that name, but yeah.
So that must, one of the other boys' sons or something. If it's Stork name, he had to have been through the sons, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I see here that when William died, so he's buried in Rock County, or that's where he died. It says Rosedale Township, Rock County.
So is that's That's Minnesota?
Yep.
So what he did was, that was where my great-grandfather and family lived. They moved there, which is near Pipestone, I believe. It's in southwest Minnesota.
Okay.
And that's probably where he died, but then he was buried in Harmony.
Okay, so he went to live with his son or something when he got older?
I'm not sure if he lived with them. He might have just been there.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Have you come across anything in, like, with William's parents or with his siblings or even his spouse, that Angeline, that indicates anything about anti-slavery or anything like that?
I wish I could tell you, and I know. And I have been in contact with a newly discovered historic relative, who came here last summer. She was just amazing, the amount of research she did. And she went to the Minnesota Historical Society, and she went to Harmony, and she went to, that whole family moved to Lime Springs too, Springs, Iowa.
Yeah.
Those Lime Springs was a very, very important part of this family. And that's just south of, not far from Harmony.
Right.
But anyway, I did put in a question to her, and she'd given me so much information that I've known. But I sent an email to her this morning, just thinking, I didn't ask the questions about Dayton or Alger, and so what she said, unfortunately, because I know she'd tell me whatever she knew. She's so well versed in it, and she said, when I was doing research in and on Minnesota, I did not pursue William's anti-slavery lobbying. I know the passage you're talking about, which is what I just read you, from his file. I had tried to find information on his abolitionist connections when I was in Lake Geneva, Walworth County, but came up empty. Off the top, I've got nothing to contribute. I'm assuming whoever is calling you, which is you, has already combed the Minnesota Historical Society newspaper archives and the Fillmore County Historical Society.
Right. Yeah. Well, sometimes there's something in a family Bible or something. You never know what.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Now, you said he was a Methodist originally, and then he kind of left the church and became like a Universalist, and then they were kind of like spiritualists with the seance.
Spiritualists.
Yeah,
that's what they were. They were spiritualists. I couldn't come up with that name.
Did he? Go ahead.
I recall later on that I haven't reviewed it yet, but he referred to that being a spiritualist.
Did he do that did he convert to that or start practicing that out in New York or after he came to Minnesota?
After he came to Minnesota, I think.
Okay, because what's really interesting, not that this means anything, but not real far north of there, I guess it's a little bit of a drive, but there's a family that's biracial that came early in 1856, the Eastons. They were from way far out east. And go ahead.
Can you hang on for just a second?
Yep, no problem.
Okay, sorry. If I lose you, I'll call you back.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, just let me see if I can do this. Well, I glanced at, as much as I could, the rest of this journal of William Storks. And, we were talking about his vision, and you were referring to maybe it had something to do with his anti-slavery work.
Or the Civil War or something. I don't know.
Civil War, yeah. So here's what it says a little later on. Let me think now here. Where is it? Oh, come on now. I now saw and fully realized the meaning of that beautiful temple that I saw in the vision. That splendid temple was meant to represent the millennium that all prophets and holy men have foretold as sure to come when pure and undefiled religion shall prevail in the earth and men shall learn war no more. It represented the same ideas. It foreshadowed the same things to come, that the New Jerusalem seen by St. John the Divine in his vision, which was let down out of heaven, represented the new ideas on the subject of religion that was sure to come, spiritualism. So,
interesting.
I found that this was hard to understand, actually, his explanation to me.
Yeah.
But,
well, maybe you're right. Maybe it means that it's more, because he became like a universalist, the idea of instead of fighting over whose religion is right, we just believe that there's something bigger out there, and we leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the pages before that, he went through quite a struggle himself, emotionally and psychologically. Couldn't sleep for 3 days and had visions of things happening, and the woman I told you about that was my newly discovered relative who has done a lot of work in this was feeling like there was a suspicion that he might have had some sort of condition, like okay, now what is it now? What's the condition? That's if someone has something where they go into a spasm, a fit, what is that called? Oh, shoot.
Like epilepsy? No.
Epilepsy. That's what she said. She wondered if some of this, because he really went through times where he was just really struggling emotionally and wondered if maybe there was an epileptic fits he was having, but that was just, it doesn't say that, and he wasn't diagnosed with anything, but
sure. Yeah, you never know.
He was washing clothes with his wife, and suddenly there was a bright light, like a long continuous flash of lightning, penetrated his entire being. So that was going on. He does not write. His journal really kind of ends abruptly. Talks about, there's a chapter that's just about arriving in Fillmore County, and it's just 2 pages.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, there's no. He is really referring here to spiritualism. He's nothing specific, but he mentions spiritualism a couple different times.
Interesting. I wonder if there's a way that I could do some digging around to see if there were spiritualist healers in the Harmony area, because I think that's what I was talking about right before you had to jump off. The Easton family up by St. Charles, they were biracial from out east, and one of the brothers, he marries a woman who ends up, they do a spiritualism, exactly the same kind of stuff where they're talking to spirits, and it was herbal healing and all, very unique stuff. But she was pretty popular in the Rochester area. I wonder if there were like several of these healers in the area. I don't know.
I'm thinking there might have been. He talks in pages back before that, before he was really struggling with those 3 days of not sleeping and landing on spiritualism, about rapping. And rapping, it says, I have read in the public prints of the remarkable manifestations occurring near Rochester, New York, of the unaccountable raps that were heard in the Fox family. That committee was appointed to investigate. A committee was appointed to investigate them. A committee by the public. That these committees all reported the fact that the raps were heard, but no committee could ascertain what caused. I felt that I would like to investigate this curious thing that had so puzzled the community. James Stedman, one of our nearest neighbors, and myself, as we worked together, often talked about it, not thinking that we would ever have an opportunity to investigate it, but time rolled on. So rapping, he's talking about table legs rapping and seeing spirits and prickly sensations in his hand.
How is that wrapping spelled? W-R-A-P? Or no?
Can you say that again?
How is the word wrap spelled there?
Oh, R-A-P.
Okay.
Raps. He talks about raps, R-A-P-S. And I think it's referring to, when they were having sessions like with mediums, trans sessions, that they're looking for some sign from beyond, and table legs start rapping.
Oh, okay.
Bouncing up and down. I think that's where it comes from.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I bet you didn't think I was going to go there.
No, I mean, I'm just curious because this other family, and they were actually involved in the Underground Railroad. She was a spiritualist too, so that was that's a unique thing that's in common. But I'm trying to find these things, so I'm jumping to conclusions quickly.
I feel like this relative that has done all this work, I have a feeling that she has thoroughly investigated as deeply as anyone could William Stork, and if there was more written, I think she would have found it.
Yeah, it's just so interesting that he made sure to talk about his anti-slavery, story, especially in the Harmony area. And I don't know, now you mentioned like Harmony has some kind of little history center, or is that the Fillmore County History Center? Is that?
I think there are both of them, but there is the place that I stumbled into was directly in Harmony.
Okay.
But the place that this relative of mine, Jane, went to, I believe, was the Fillmore County Historical Society or something like that.
Okay, because I've been to the Fillmore County Historical Society, and I mean, I go in and I ask for folders on families, and you find a little bit if you know how to dig through like the books. They have books on all kinds of stuff. Then you can sometimes find more clues, but I just haven't had time to do that. But I'm thinking. Go ahead.
Is that in Harmony?
No, so that one is north of there. It's in Fountain. So it's right on Highway 52, and if you keep going south from there, it's like another 10 miles to Harmony, or maybe 12 miles.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, this place is not that, and I was excited about stumbling into it. It was right downtown Harmony. It's like right next to like a public square or something and in there were all of these records, and there was a guy who was interested as I was about what I was trying to find, any information on my family.
Yeah. And
he was the one who found that newspaper clipping that I posted on Ancestry.com.
Okay, nice. Well, I wonder because if William became a spiritualist and he kind of, stopped going to the Methodist church, it sounds like he didn't really even attend a church when he came to Minnesota. He had already stopped.
Right.
Yeah. And then this after Hogue guy, he was Quaker, and then I should look into Daniel Dayton if they attended a church. Probably not. I'm guessing they were all kind of like Universalists, like they were kind of open-minded. Because if they were at a church, there's oftentimes church records, unless the church burned down, which might tell a little bit more of a story, but they didn't go to a church. So that's not...
I don't recall him talking about going to a Methodist church. Did you find that somewhere?
Well, you mentioned something when you were reading his journal that maybe it wasn't he was at the church, somebody who was a Methodist preacher from Wisconsin? Something about this guy? I don't remember what it was.
Yeah. There were a couple passages, I believe, in this journal that he talked about going to a church, like they were visiting speakers that were going to be speaking.
Okay.
And he would go to a church to challenge them. And there were two, I believe there were, I wish I could tell you, or wish I could read it to you, I don't know where it is, but it seemed like he was there to kind of challenge them, and he had played some shenanigans. He was disrupting the church service. There was someone who was selling Bibles, and somehow he disrupted the whole thing, and it was just challenging. So it wasn't that he was there to worship at all. He was there to
Stinker.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this is where he describes it as if it's hilarious sitting behind someone up in the balcony of this church. I believe maybe it was in Lake Geneva, or maybe it was even before that. Maybe it was when he was young. But he talks about the church being, full of people, and the person sitting in front of him was leaning against the side of the pew, and there was some board or something like just the side of the pew that he pulled out, and the guy fell over and caused a big disruption. I know what it was. There was another thing that he did that one of these meetings were going on, and he disrupted the whole thing by ringing the church bell.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, he was sort of a Dickens.
They must have seen him coming and said, "Oh no, here comes that Mr. Stork."
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny.
Boy, yeah.
Well, I mean, we know he was involved to some extent in talking about anti-slavery. So I just want to know, how does that make you feel as a descendant of his? What do you think about that?
Well, without really knowing truly what he did beyond just having a meeting and talking to people about it, I think I actually think that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That he was, maybe planting seeds. Maybe a seed planter of ideas of the end of slavery.
Right. Yep. And it would be interesting to know what his parents thought about slavery. I mean, if he wasn't against it growing up, I'm guessing they probably weren't either. But who knows?
Right.
So to have that epiphany, later in life, as he's already an adult, he already has kids when he kind of changes his perspective.
The interesting thing that I believe this is right, and don't hold me to it, but I think I was reading about the fact that his father, John Stork, was born in 1776.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is really interesting with the Declaration of Independence and the whole fight of slavery during that time, that it was not, there was the big fight to try to end slavery then, which didn't end.
Right.
But I think that was an interesting thing that he was born that year.
Yeah, yeah.
So when he came, to young adulthood, his father, he must have had some knowledge, maybe had some knowledge of history of the young America and Declaration of Independence, but slavery was just not a part of being abolished at that time.
Right. Yeah, and I tried to look at where they lived in New York, and then that Lake Geneva area is that Walworth County or something like that, Wisconsin. Yeah. And there is abolitionist Underground Railroad stories in those places, but so if anything, they're growing up hearing, it's in the newspapers. They're hearing, obviously, William Stork talked about the conversations at the local church or whatever. They're surrounded by this conversation. It's just a matter of what in their own personal lives causes them to change.
Yeah, I wish he would have written more about that, because it's pretty abruptly stated in here that he's expressing, and when he's writing this, he's writing it after the fact. So he's writing what he used to feel, what he used to believe about,
Yeah.
That it was, but he, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought.
I wonder too.
Somehow something must have happened, because suddenly he reflected back on the black people that he knew in New York, who had every right to have the freedom freedom that he had.
Right. It's
So I don't know.
It's too bad he didn't keep like an actual daily diary where he could have dated like 1851. And you know it's the exact date when his mind changed, because there were things on the national level like the fugitive slave law that was passed that said, yeah, we could go into free states and reclaim fugitive slaves and bring them back to the South. And that made a lot of people mad, and that made a lot of people change their minds on slavery. So who knows if there was something like that kind of sparked his change of thought, change of heart. Oh.
You know, with your contacting me, I want to tell you that I there's a class that I had a couple of years ago called let's see, what's it called? Writing your story, real stories, or something like that. And it's writing a play using things in your own life.
Okay.
And, so I did that with another thing. Being a retired music teacher, I used that. Tried to write. We had to write a 10-minute play.
Oh, nice,
class.
Nice.
And now I've just seen that it's offered again this spring, and I thought, gee, in reading this, I thought there's so many interesting stories about William Stork.
Right.
Wonder if I take it again and use his stories and with this whole thing about reflecting on why what was the change of heart that he had, or he clarified suddenly he was really anti-slavery.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you think about, like, in current events, context, like views that people have about certain kind of social justice issues. How people could change their perspectives, maybe see through the lens of the people on the other side of the story. What triggers that? Yeah.
Right.
Deep thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time. I will stay in touch with you. And actually, as this project wraps up, I'll make sure you get a copy of the transcript. And also, once these are archived, I can send you a link to, you can listen to all the other interviews too if you want. But
that would be just great.
Yeah, I tried to interview people from each county down here. And there's a lot more people, there's a lot more stories, but just tracking down descendants. And then even if you find the descendants, oftentimes they say, I don't have any information. Right?
Yeah,
so
right.
You were lucky you had a few clues.
Yeah, a little bit. I hope it helped. The Stork family is on my mother's side of the family.
Okay.
And my father's side of the family, an interesting thing that happened, that since you've been involved with this project and Minnesota Historical Society, that my dad had these letters during the Civil War time of his, let me think now, who would that have been? Great-grandfather, I guess.
Oh, wow.
And great-grandmother. And during the Civil War, he went off to war, and she stayed home, and they wrote back and forth. They were kind of love letters.
Oh, my goodness.
Beautifully written, and he was talking about the Civil War time and where he was. And so there are all these things, and Dad turned them over for a while to the Historical Society, and then he got them back, and the message was, we couldn't do anything with them right now. So several years later, my dad had died, and I went to the Historical Society. This is just astounding to me when I recall this now. I went to the Historical Society, and in their displays, I walked up to this thing, and it said, John and Emily Mitchell, a love story or something like that. And it was a whole display they had recorded the letters and put together this beautiful museum-like display of, there was a tent where he was in the Army, in the War Service, and she was at home, and so it was like a whole set.
Oh, wow.
And this was at the Minnesota Historical Society, and they hadn't let us know.
That's
your
weird.
dad turned over these letters.
Yeah, you'd think that they would have reached out to at least let you know or ask permission.
I let them know. I actually just was astounded by it. That I wanted to know how did that evolve and come about.
Yeah.
And no one seemed to really know. And I don't know if they were embarrassed that they hadn't let us know or what, but
Wow.
it was interesting.
Well, your diary you have on William Stork, you should make a copy of that and give that to the Historical Society if you haven't already done that.
I haven't done that.
Yeah, because that would be amazing for them to have it archived and like the Fillmore, or at least the Fillmore County History Center. You know, because this stuff, you never know. Like, you could have the best intentions and something happens to you and this ends up in a garbage can somewhere, you know?
Well, right. This was sort of spurred on by my mother and a distant relative. And what I'm looking at right now is the book that's spiral bound, and the first half is all of William's journal, handwritten.
Ooh, jeepers.
Yeah, and then the last half, someone has taken all those handwritten pages and typed it out.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yes, more than a lot of people would ever think to have. So
Yeah, because
I'm lucky about it.
for sure. And then just having somebody that transcribed it into typewritten, oh, that's nice, because reading handwriting can be really hard.
Oh yeah, right.
Oh my goodness. Well, I appreciate all of your time.
Yeah, okay, well, good luck.
Yeah.
Love to see your final thing.
For sure. I'll stay in touch. You have a good rest of your day.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Sarah.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.